365. I'm your host, John McMullen Jeff Kerr, sitting in for Jody McDonald, who is down in Key West, Florida. So he is living the life we all want to leave. The rest of us are left to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Los Angeles Chargers. You also got to worry about that, Jeff. I always want to say, I'm busting out to say San Diego Chargers still to this day, but it is the Los Angeles Chargers. Good opponent. Before I get into that, though, and we're going to have plenty of time to talk about it, my buddy from Sports Illustrated, Ed Kratz, is going to join us in about 20 minutes. We're going to talk plenty of Eagles Chargers, but since you're here, because I always get these questions and I can't stand them, I'm going to give it to you. So you're going to have to do the heavy lifting. The Cleveland Browns are going to move on from Odell Beckham Jr. It is very, very evident that is going to happen. They're restructuring his deal. They're hoping to put him on waivers today. If not today, it'll probably be Monday, and hope somebody will pick up the deal. So Eagles fans, Jeff, Odell Beckham's a guy they've heard of. They want him. Yes or no on OBJ?
I forget. I saw it on Twitter when I woke up this morning, and someone posted a picture of Odell Beckham in an Eagles jersey. I want to give credit to, I think it was the mighty E-Rock that actually said, that's more of a weed than a flower. And I'm like, that's actually pretty good. I think it was him. I got to double check that, but that is an awesome quote. And Greg Ward has more receiving touchdowns than Odell Beckham Jr. since he joined the Browns, which I find incredible.
Well, I thought Jody Mack was in Key West. I think he might be channeling through Jeff Kerr, the biggest Greg Ward fan in the world. That's why I said.
Oh, yeah, he is the biggest Greg Ward fan in the world. In fact, a guy who was on Good Morning Football last week has more receiving touchdowns than Odell Beckham Jr. since he joined the Browns, and that would be another former Eagle, Golden Tate. So that's how productive OBJ has been in Cleveland. And they can blame Baker Mayfield all they want. He is not the same player he was prior to 2017. He just isn't. Like, he's still a name. He's a talent. Would I take a shot on him? Not on this team. I just don't think he helps anything. I just don't know what to make of Odell Beckham Jr. anymore. I always feel like it's going to be a Randy Moss type situation where it's just not the right fit and he'll go ball out somewhere else. But I just think there's too much controversy surrounding this guy. And I know that we've had that with T.O., with Randy Moss, but can we honestly say he's T.O. or Randy Moss at this stage in his career? I mean, Randy Moss is bad in Oakland, but I don't know, John. I just don't think I take the gamble.
I'm with you. I'm just tired of putting the no up on Twitter. Should the Eagles go after insert name? And 97, I'm going to say 97.8% of the time it comes back as a no. On the occasion, it makes sense. I mean, you got a rookie head coach going through this, and you see what's going on in Cleveland. And by the way, who's in Cleveland? Kevin Stefanski, and Andrew Berry. And Andrew Berry was in Philadelphia, is very close to Howie Roseman. I mean, people got to do the arithmetic here. The Eagles want no part of that personality in that locker room while you're trying to grow that flower. You're trying to grow that plant. You're trying to build this chemistry. And I bring up that term chemistry because that's what essentially Kevin Stefanski is. They value chemistry more than the talent of the player when the player is being a pain in the you-know-what. So no, but from a football standpoint, let's be honest, the Eagles could use another receiver, to say the least.
That's the thing. If they took a chance on him, I wouldn't be against it. I definitely not, because you're right, John. Look at their backups. It's J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who's hurt, Greg Ward, who I pointed out earlier somehow has more touchdowns than Odell Beckham Jr. since he joined the Browns, and that's it.
Now we're talking about John Hightower being elevated from the practice squad this week, and
Eagles fans probably forgot he was even on the roster at this point.
Yeah, I mean they're really bad at what receiver. I mean, really bad. And I didn't think I've been talking about this for years. I mean, they've been the worst team in football, 32 out of 32 when it comes to receiver production. And you would hope that Devontae Smith coming in as the number 10 overall pick would elevate that. And maybe it has. I haven't, you probably pay attention to the rest of the league more than I do these days. So maybe there's somebody worse out there. If you got one, throw it at me. But this time, I think it has something to do with the quarterback as well, at least when it comes to Devontae Smith. But the other guys, I mean, if you rotated them all out in the offseason and just redid the whole room, I think it would make sense.
See, here's the thing, John. You point this out. I think Detroit, in terms of talent, may be worse than Philadelphia wide receiver. But if you look at production, I think the Eagles are like 22nd or 23rd in wide receiver yards this year, which is, by the way, is their best since they made the playoffs in 2018. It's been a rough couple years for Eagles fans. I mean, Quez Watkins he's a productive player. Devonta Smith has made them better. You can go down the list here, but they're the main two. I honestly, I'll go this route, and I know we've had him twice here. Deshaun Jackson wouldn't be a bad fit for this team either. And
stop!
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Stop you. Well, before you go down that route, I'm going to let you hang yourself. But before you go down that route, I do, want to, obviously the Eagles played the Lions last week, and I said that coming into the game. Yeah, this is probably the first time all year you're going to have an advantage at the wide receiver position heading into a game. Maybe the last time all year. But at least the Lions had some injuries and guys who were supposed to play and supposed to be a big part of that offense are not part of that offense due to injury. So even that, I mean, you could say if Terrell Williams is out there, I forget they had a second injury. I forget who it was, but if those guys were out there, Cephas, who's
Cephas,
I think it changes things a little bit. So Deshaun Jackson, I mean, look, some of the issues that went on before he left with the anti-Semitism and Jeffrey Lurie giving him a second chance, a second opportunity. And then you have the constant injuries at this stage of his career and the belief that, he's still Deshaun Jackson, which I guess you have to, if you're in that environment, you have to believe in yourself. But it's not as bad as Odell Beckham Jr., but it's kind of the same thing. Do you really want that in the well of young receivers and Devontae Smith and Quez Watkins and Jalen Reagor? I don't think the Eagles want that at this point. And it makes things more difficult on the head coach as well.
Yeah, honestly, I tweeted this the other day. I thought if there's any two teams that go after him, it'd probably be the Chiefs or the Packers, just because I feel like it'd be a better fit for what he wants and how they scheme him up. And look, if anybody's going to take a chance on a player like that, would be Andy Reid. And a Chiefs fan actually said to me, well, how could they go out to Deshaun when they can't give Josh Gordon the ball? I'm like, you just kind of answered your own question. Josh Gordon isn't good anymore either. He's just not that player. This is the problem with Odell Beckham. Everybody thinks it's 2014, 2015.
Yeah, it's always.
Yeah,
you can insert any name, Jeff. It could be Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon is the perfect example. Josh Gordon, people think he has been put in stasis by all the suspensions, and he's the same guy in Cleveland who had 1,600 yards in 12 games. He's not close to being the same guy from a physical perspective. Either it's Deshaun Jackson, either it's Odell Beckham Jr. Guys don't stay the same. So when you think about the one-handed catch from OBJ, that's not the Odell Beckham you're getting at this stage of his career. Why is it so hard for people to understand that players descend? They see it when they're watching their own team. They have no problem saying it about Fletcher Cox, for instance. But when it comes to somebody outside the organization, they hear the big name, Josh Gordon being even a better example, and they say, oh, let's go get that guy. I don't get it.
I still say it's the Randy Moss effect. He was terrible those 2 years in Oakland, and I was one of those people. I said, look, T.O. is a better receiver than him. No matter where he goes, Randy Moss checks out. He's still really talented, but he had those problems in Oakland. Then he goes to New England and has 23 touchdowns. That's the NFL record in a season. And I guess everybody thinks that can happen with their team. I'm like, well, no, it's the Patriot way. It was Tom Brady getting him over there. It's Randy Moss checking out. It was a combination of things. And, everybody wants to say, and I love Randy Moss, but I will argue with anybody, T.O. was a better receiver than him. I just will.
You're going to lose that argument.
I'm going to lose that argument. I will argue it because
T.O.'s a great receiver. He's a great receiver. Here's how I always describe it. I had the opportunity to cover Randy Moss early in his career when he, his rookie season when he just exploded. I've never seen defenses to this day. I've never seen defenses completely morph their personalities to try to stop a receiver. You would have this weird. It was almost weird to see from an all 22 perspective. You would see people do it all the time now, but they didn't do it back then. They would have, obviously the corner would be on it. They put the one safety all the way over on top of Moss, who was, always outside the numbers because Denny Green started him out with a very small plate of route running. It wasn't like he was in the slot or moving around. So they put the safety way outside the numbers. And they also kicked out the linebacker. Remember, teams still played a lot of 4-3 back then. And they would also kick out a linebacker. So you had almost like a three-way bracket of one particular player. And remember, by the way, at the time, Minnesota had another Hall of Fame receiver, Chris Carter. And
Jake Reed kid wasn't too bad.
Jake Reed was the third receiver. For people who don't know him, he was really good. It was startling. So anytime I see coaches react to something like that, okay, that tells you this kid is something. And then just over the years being in locker rooms, there's certain players that their peers are in awe of. I always use the example. Aaron Donald is the example right now. Players are just in awe of Aaron Donald. Mike Vick, in a lot of ways, was sort of like that. That's Randy Moss for the receiver position. I mean, for receivers that grew up with Randy Moss, that not grew up, but played with Randy Moss, you can't tell them Jerry Rice was better. Never mind T.O. They can't believe, and Jerry Rice was better, by the way. You can't tell them that. I mean, they're like, there's no way. There is no way. And that's not an insult to T.O. because T.O. was a great receiver, but Randy Moss was on a different level. And if you take out those couple of years when he kind of was pissed off and he kind of, I don't know what it was, depression. We talk about mental health all the time. He was upset about where he was, how he was used, really in the end in Minnesota with the Raiders as well. And then obviously he took off again. If he kept playing during those two seasons, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Oh, and that's just it. Unfortunately, that's part of the tale of Randy Moss. And I honestly can't believe how quick Randy Moss tailed off. Like, he was 33 years old, and all of a sudden he just couldn't play anymore. I mean, he came back from San Francisco that 1 year and was, productive, but he wasn't Randy Moss. And it's actually kind of amazing when you think about the longevity of a guy like T.O. And
nobody kept themselves in better shape than T.O. But I will give you a little tidbit about Randy Moss because his reputation really coming in was, he doesn't play on certain plays. He takes plays off. It was about, I don't know. He was, it had to be. I'll look it up real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons in. So his 7th season of his career. Before he missed the game, he actually tore his hamstring and still played, by the way. Played as mainly a decoy. In those first 6+ seasons, and I was there for the vast majority of them. He didn't miss a practice, never mind a game. So there was this reputation like he didn't work hard. He just relies on his talent. He worked really hard.
Oh, he did, and those are stories I heard. And speaking of a T.O. Jerry Rice thing, I got a chance to do a one-on-one with Jeff Garcia a couple years ago. We were talking for 3 hours, and he goes, "Jeff, can you believe my first year as a starting quarterback, I got to throw to Terrell Owens and Jerry Rice?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right. Jerry Rice was on the 49ers in 2000." It's kind of hard to believe he wasn't Jerry Rice anymore, but he did have a 1,000-yard season at 40 years old. So it's actually incredible when you think of the era of receiver in that time. I mean, Herman Moore was when the Eagles were playing the Lions. Boy, was Herman Moore underrated, and Brett Perriman. That it's a shame that the Lions had Scott Mitchell as their quarterback, because who would have known what that team would have done in the mid-90s? But
I bring up Chris Carter all the time because I got pretty close to him over the years, and you see guys today. I mean, they're such dynamic playmakers. We see one here, DeMonte Smith. But you see the drop. You've had a drop in first 2 games. You mentioned Herman. You see CD Lamb, who's a tremendous playmaker, but you see drops. He dropped one on Sunday night, all over the place. Chris Carter didn't drop the football, man. He did not drop the football.
Catch passes and catch touchdowns.
He didn't drop the football in practice. He didn't drop the football. I mean, Herman Moore is another guy you brought up. It's kind of a different era, obviously, but now it's more, I think, the emphasis is on the athleticism and the playmaking, and you just accept some of the drops. I mean, there are guys that literally caught 122 passes with no drops.
Irving Fryer was
an
a
NFL
guy
season.
I've never seen drop a pass. And keep in mind, I'm really young, but I remember when Ty Detmer or Rodney Peete throw the ball, and he'd catch everything. It's he was embracing the hit, and I just think today it's weird when you see guys drop passes, because I'm like, okay, these guys, in my opinion, are a little more talented than these guys, but
they are athletically, but yeah.
It's got to be lack of concentration, right?
Well, it's also working on it. It's also technique and fundamentals. Nick Sirianni was talking about it with DeMonte Smith this week about, sometimes when the ball's in your stomach, you're in between, you put your thumbs together, you put your pinkies together, you don't know which way to put your hands. That's just reps and reps and reps, and you didn't see that stuff with those great receivers. But now it's time to shift gears, Jeff Kerr. We're going to get into the Eagles-Chargers game on Sunday, and we're going to do it with my buddy Ed Kratz from Sports Illustrated after the break. Eagle Maven Ed, I like to call him, because he had to switch his Twitter handle for a very short period of time. So that's an interesting story. Maybe we'll get into that as well.
Yeah, I thought it disappeared for a little bit there. I'm like, well,
yeah, he disappeared. He disappeared. So we're going to find out why. That's a tease on Birds 365 right after the break.